Welcome back to LaidOPEN podcast. I'm your host, Charna Cassell, and today's guest is Susan Morgan Taylor. She's a somatic sex therapist who helps couples deepen their intimacy and create lasting, fulfilling connections. With over 25 years of experience in somatic healing, she developed the Pleasure Keys process, a powerful approach to reigniting sexual and emotional harmony in relationships. She's also the creator of the Pleasure Keys retreats and a host of the Sex Talk Cafe podcast. Susan is a woman after my own heart. She's had such a rich, interesting background in intuitive healing and body work, and her own sexual healing path led her to becoming a sex and somatic therapist and working with couples and helping them have more embodied pleasure. And it's just a testament to, a certain amount of courage that it takes to be this kind of practitioner. I think that there's a lot of fear around sex and sexuality for people, and you need a guide. You need to know that you can get to the other side of this. I know that that's what I've been for people, and that even, you know, when I was a kid and reading certain books, like someone survived this experience to write this book, or someone survived these experiences to then heal and become this kind of practitioner, gave me a sense of hope. So I hope that you find this useful and inspiring. So here we go. Welcome, Susan.
Learn how to live embodied. Your life is about to unwind. Uncover new tools and start healing. Leave trauma and tension behind. Isn't it great? Laid open. Let all your desires come true. How can you live laid open? Imagine yourself brand new. Imagine yourself brand new.
I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today. We're gonna have a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's lots of ways. I was saying offline that our paths intersect in a variety of ways, and you have a background in massage therapy, being an intuitive healer, and I'm really curious about the different ways that you've blended that with your work around somatic sex
Yeah.
education and couples counseling.
Yeah. Oh, such a big question. I mean, yeah, it's so interesting in life how, you kind of move on from one thing, but it still follows you in some way. There's some part of that still it becomes a part of you. And I feel like at this point in my life, my work is very expressive of the many different avenues that I've collected over the years. So I would say that, the intuitive piece, a lot of that journey for me when I was doing intuitive healing back in 2008, I just adore, I love doing that kind of work. But really how it's shown up now is it really just helps me dial into my clients. And I work a lot with couples, primarily with couples. And I really am able to kind of feel into what's happening kind of beneath the surface. And we just drop
Mhm,
in and we get quiet. And a lot of that came out of learning how to just trust myself.
mhm,
So I think my time as an intuitive healer it really taught me how to let go of needing techniques. Techniques are important up to a certain point. They give a certain structure and they help give you the gateway in. But if there comes a time where you have the technique can only serve you so far. And then there comes a time where the work teaches you. And it's sort of like a martial art. Like you'll hear that if
mhm,
anyone's ever studied martial arts, that's the same concept, right? You kind of learn the moves, but there comes a point when the move then moves you. The dance dances you. And so largely that's really how the intuitive work shows up. It's just really using that to dial into feeling into that space between as I'm working with a client. I think the somatic work, so somatic meaning of or pertaining to the body. I know that that word sometimes needs clearing up. I don't know if your listeners, need that clarification, but a lot of people do. I've always worked with bodies. My first career was as a massage therapist. I've been a dancer my whole entire life. And I think that the sensitivity and touch, touch-based work, when I really started to study touch, and I've done a lot of work with Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent, that's a huge
Mhm.
influence on my pleasure keys process that I do with my clients. It really was a game changer for me in terms of really learning the dynamics of pleasure and really understanding, like, wow, all those years when I was working in a spa,
Mm.
or working for myself, doing touch-based work, there's all the lights came on when I really started to learn how to clarify. For example, this is the one question I say every couple needs to know the answer to,
Mhm.
but it's such a game changer. Really, who is this for? Am I doing what I'm wanting to do? Am I doing what, let's say in the massage situation, what my client actually wants? We really don't understand the profundity of that clarification.
Mhm.
But when we do, and how that applies, especially when, we're talking about sexuality or desire mismatch with couples, which is one of my specialties, it really can be an absolute game changer to understand the depth of that question and why it's so important to answer it. In most situations when there's what I call, like, the train wreck moments that
Mm.
a lot of couples that come to me anyway have had a lot of those to the extent
Mhm.
they're avoiding sex and intimacy altogether because it's just gone south and they don't know why, they don't know how to back out of it and how to start over. It's a lot of times because we don't understand who the moment's happening for, who's the touch happening for, who is the thing that's being done to,
Mm.
or the one who's doing, whose desire are we actually following? So in all my years spent as a massage therapist, I did that for 25 years, kind of full time and then part time as I did different things and went through graduate school and all that. But it's always been a part of my life using touch. And it really helps to tune in that level of sensitivity and awareness. But having that understanding that there's a difference of who it's happening for, it's a game changer. And I mean, there's so much inside of that question, but I'll
Mhm.
just kind of leave it there because I don't know what direction we want to go today. But
There's and inside what you already said, there's, like, 5 or 6 different beautiful
yeah,
openings.
yeah,
The also the thing that you're touching on that's important just as a practitioner, because I wanna get into your couple's work as well, but is, who is the touch happening for, or what is the like, as a practitioner, not having an agenda, but
yeah,
listening for what is wanting to happen like, actually listening to the client, and that's something that you're modeling for these
yeah.
couples, right? Versus having, a partner being like, "I'm gonna make you come," like, having an
Right.
agenda because it feeds their ego in some way,
Yeah.
rather than actually what does your partner want to happen or what does your
Yeah.
client want to happen?
And even that can be a really dangerous space to play in. Now, there's a certain level of intuitiveness and feeling into the moment, but that is and is wonderful. But I think that that can also become a trap because sometimes we can feel that somebody wants something, but we could be totally wrong. We
Mhm.
might be totally wrong. So
Mhm.
there's that, and that's one domain to play in, right? Like
Yeah.
intuitive massage, for example. It's
Mm.
a style of massage that I did for a period of time. Or just teaching couples erotic massage is wonderful, but there's also so much more that can come when we have the clarity and we're empowered in using our voice. Because I
Mhm.
think in the dynamic you just described, what can sometimes happen is maybe that person that feels that their partner wants this kind of touch, like, oh, I just feel like this is what you want. But that might not. What if that isn't true and that partner's just gritting their teeth?
Yeah.
Kind of like thinking, well, maybe he's just doing this because that's what he wants. It's not really feeling good for me, but I'm going to go along with it. But the whole time he was thinking that's what she wanted. And that's the very kind of scenario that happens
Mhm.
all the time.
Mhm.
So it's wonderful to have the skills and the framework and the common language to be able to clear that up. And that's largely, what I do in my work with the pleasure keys process that I developed is really about creating that clarity. And from there, then you have the choice. You can choose to apply that and use it, or you can choose to kind of be loose with it.
Yeah.
And maybe you do play on the edge of I'm just going to feel into what I feel like your body's asking for. But it sure is helpful if that other person is empowered in knowing their limits and able to speak up of like, this isn't working for me. Right. Being able to have the voice and they have that shared language and shared framework is really super important for depths of pleasure and orgasmic potential and all these wonderful things that are available when we play intimately.
And you mentioned it for a moment, but the wheel of consent, which is a really important component of how you work. Why
Yes.
don't you just go a little bit over that so that
Yeah.
people have clarity?
Well, so yeah, I mean, so that's a body of work developed by Betty Martin, and she's just an amazing sex educator who developed a body of work called the Wheel of Consent. And at its core, the wheel is really about creating clarity. Like it's hard to describe it because it's really it's an experience. It's not something that you can watch a video on. She did write a book on it, which is lovely. But even reading a book on it or watching a video, you cannot learn that work by just watching a video or reading a book. The way we learn it is through the embodied experience of it, through the actual somatic lived experience. There's four different dynamics of touch that happen. And largely, it's dependent on that question of who is this happening for? Meaning, whose desire in this moment are we following? Now, it might not even have to do with touch, like why I think this work is so groundbreaking and so
Mhm.
illuminating. It doesn't have to do with sex or touch because we could have many moments in life where something's happening and, one person maybe is thinking the other person wants it, and so they're just going along with it. They're not happy about it, but the other person is thinking, "Well, I was doing it for them, and they weren't
Yeah.
happy about it." Any we could just look at there's so many moments that happen like that in life
Right.
that it's nice to be resourced in the ability to know how to clear that up and quickly. It's not that we have to have that clarity all the time, but I look at the wheel of consent and the pleasure keys, by the way, which are very influenced by wheel of consent. It is really a tool for creating clarity. And when we have clarity, what happens, the natural byproduct of clarity is there's more confidence and there's more connection
Mm.
and we also get pleasure. Pleasure actually there's a structure to pleasure. And so what we're doing when we create that clarity, we're consciously creating the context for deeper connection and pleasure and
Mhm.
doing it on purpose. And it's very easy to do.
And how your use of the wheel of consent fits into the pleasure keys and, like, what if you could spell out what the pleasure keys are?
Yeah, well, the pleasure keys, there's 3 triads, and that consist of what I call wisdom codes, and so there's sort of 9 wisdom codes, and it's a framework for understanding how to create that clarity. So
Mm.
one of my favorite ones that's easiest to talk about in a soundbite, like in
Yeah.
this format, is what I call the 3 Ns, which is notice, name, and negotiate. So noticing being the very first, well, it's the second triad. Notice, name, negotiate is the second triad of the 3 triads and the pleasure
Yeah.
keys. And noticing is really that first step. It's really about becoming aware of physical sensations that are in the body. Because what's happening a lot is we're often up in our head. We're in the past, we're in their future, we're anywhere but here and now. And so as we shift our awareness, and awareness is one of the pleasure keys of the first triad, by the way, and they all kind of sort of feed
Yeah.
into each other. But as we cultivate our awareness and we can focus it onto physical sensation, something really cool happens. Immediately, we become more present. We're immediately here in this moment now. That we don't have to clear our thoughts for an hour, stare at a wall, meditate on a mountain. Like literally in this moment, we can just shift where we're holding our attention at any one time. Is my attention up in my head? Am I on my to-do list? Am I thinking about yesterday or tomorrow? Is my attention on the room around me? Or is my attention on, just noticing the physical sensations that I'm aware of? What else am I aware of? So the ability to notice is really the gateway in to all the other dynamics we work with in the pleasure keys. And the same is also true in the wheel of consent. I have some different ways that I've embodied that work, and I bring in different pieces and influences of Taoist sexuality and some
Mhm.
different things that I bring in. But really, the ability to notice if we don't have good access to that, we won't have access to what we want,
Yeah.
good access to really know what's my yes, what's my no, what's my maybe. We will not be able to access that. And so what happens is a lot of times couples go to immediately trying to negotiate something. One partner wants something, the other does or doesn't. Let's say they don't usually. That's usually when people have problems, right?
Yeah.
When everything's aligned, it's
Amicably.
easy. Yeah, then they go be like, ah, we all want different things. And they go immediately into trying to getting the thing that they want, but they don't have these first couple of pieces in place of the ability to notice what's happening. What's my body feeling in response to my partner's request? How do I know if I'm a yes or no? Or maybe I'm a maybe. And if I'm a maybe, then what needs to change? What do I want or what do I need so that I could provide that thing? So that's all under the skill of noticing.
Yeah.
And the second skill is the ability to give voice to it, to actually ask for or speak the thing I want, I need, or even sometimes it's just I notice. And sometimes it's I notice that right now I don't know. I don't know what I want or need.
Mm.
Sometimes that's what's true. And when that's happening, oftentimes the way to work with that is to just slow down, reduce intensity, take a break, just pause and be still. We allow so little time for that. We always want sort of the immediate thing, the immediate answer. I have to find the thing that I want, find the thing that I need. And sometimes when we don't know, it's just a matter of let me just slow down. Maybe I just need to breathe. Maybe I need to just take a break. Okay, and then maybe something bubbles up and I can then
Yeah.
name it. And then the negotiating is the third triad, and that's a much more complex and nuanced thing that's too difficult to actually put into words. It's really a lived experience that deals with the different dynamics of how do we actually negotiate an experience where two people want different things. We have to have a giver and a receiver. We have to pull the giving and receiving apart.
Mm.
And in order to do that, we have to know whose desire are we following? Or am I
Mhm.
gonna follow what you wanna do? And, am I willing to do that thing? Or are we gonna follow what I wanna do and you're willing to do that thing? Am I willing to do it with an open heart? It's different than me wanting the thing. I might. It's possible I might want the same thing my partner wants, but it's more likely that maybe, okay, you want that thing. It's not what I want at the same time right now, but I'm willing to give it. I'd be more than happy to do that for you and give
Mhm.
you that thing. I'd be more than thrilled. A lot of times what's happening is we're giving out of obligation, right? Oh, you want that thing. I have to, if I don't give it to him, he's going to get upset. No, he did that for me yesterday, so I better do this thing for him today. Instead of the slowing down, let me start to notice what's going on. And I love the question of what would I need so that I could maybe move a little closer. Like if someone's just not sure or they're a no, there just might be something they need. They can give to themselves or ask for from their partners so that they could move a little closer in the direction of a willingness. But we don't ever want to push that. It's not about forcing ourselves to do something or get to the thing. The most important thing is that slowing down and the noticing, the naming, and then getting really good at those skills, the negotiation skills in the third triad.
You named so many different pieces that could help two people who have, like, different desire levels come
Mhm.
closer together. Is there
Yes.
anything else that you would add to that? Because that
Yes.
is it's a big one if you're a sex therapist that couples
Mhm.
into you and they have, like, one person doesn't wanna have anything to do with sex, one person has a lot of trauma, or just
Totally.
sometimes there's just a different amount of desire, but often one there's a big shutdown for one person.
Yeah, that's true. And my specialty, because I was this woman, my specialty is low libido women with high libido husbands or partners,
Mhm, mhm,
male partners. So
mhm,
like I know that place so well because I lived it
mm,
story, and I understand a lot of times what's actually happening. So in women's sexuality, there's a lot of different things that can feed into that alleged or apparent low desire. And it's not about hormones. See, that's where we kinda go sideways.
mhm,
There are certain times where hormones do play a role in our desire for sex, there no doubt about it, but we cannot be reduced to
yeah,
hormones. And I've worked with clients. God, I had this woman I worked with many years ago when I was first starting my sex therapy practice, and she was 25 years old. She came because her partner just she wasn't interested in having sex with her partner wasn't interested in having sex with her. They just had this whole thing going on.
mm,
And she, said, "My doctor put me on testosterone pellets," those
she's
pellets that
20
it's
yeah,
the whole thing. She's 25 years old. I'm like, "Are you low into I mean, you're 25." Well, come to find out, like, not too far into our work, she lost interest in sex because her partner was shaming her
yeah,
and putting her down, and, like, you're not gonna wanna be vulnerable and open and sexy with someone who's putting you down
mm,
and criticizing you. So, it's not about hormones.
yeah.
So I think I lost the thread of what you I had a point to what I was saying,
I
and
thought you were starting to say there are multiple things that can contribute to a lack of
oh, yes.
desire in
Right.
a
And
heterosexual
it's
woman.
yes, thank you. And it's not just hormones, so that's where we go wrong. So a lot of times how I work with that is about we use the pleasure keys. We slow down. We learn how to relax, relaxation and learning how to be present in what's happening in the body, and then learning how to notice and name. Those two things first and foremost. There's another piece to this as well, is that, we have this idea there's high desire and low desire and, end of story. And we hear a lot in the sex therapy world around contextual desire versus spontaneous, responsive desire versus, which I think is great and it is a thing, but that conversation I think is too limited
Yeah.
because it's leaving out the arousal maps or the arousal styles or what's called like the erotic blueprints. A lot of people are familiar with that work as well. So we have these different archetypes for how we get sexually aroused and turned on. And it is not there's like five main ways,
Mm.
right? So one partner might be wired like as the sexual, like overt sexual touch. Like let's just get down to genitals and kissing and butt and boobs and like the thing, get to the orgasm. But if you're with a partner who is wired, let's say energetically or sensually, that will shut them down very, very quickly. And so we need to have, because their gateway into sexual arousal is through a different pathway. It's through tension, distance, spaciousness, light touch, not going straight for the genitals. So you can see how if we don't understand that, it's very easy to get stuck in this high libido, low libido myth. What I really believe
Right.
is a myth, because if we just reframe the conversation, we're much more empowered in that, and we have more resources available to us to find our way through it rather than somebody feeling broken or like they need to be fixed,
Mhm.
which is how, the couples I work with, the women come in and they really feel like it's my problem, it's my fault because I don't, I'm low desire and he needs it more and I need to raise my desire to meet his. And it's really what it really is what's the pathway in? How do we find the gateway in for you?
Right. Well, and what is desire and what activates it?
Yeah.
And, for one person, because I deal with male clients who also have that, right? So it's like it can be very gendered, and then other
Sure.
times it's
Absolutely. It's not just like the typical, the woman has a low desire, the man has that just tends to be what came into my realm, and I think that's because
totally.
that was my story, right? I was the uninterested party in my marriage, and then when how I got to where I am today, it was, like, totally finding my way out of that and
Mhm.
waking up to my sexuality and being able to help other women through that, but you're right, it does go the other way as well, and a lot of times that's partly why, because they have different, blueprints or arousal maps.
Mhm.
Different ways of actually entering into where they desire to have, like, genital stimulation, for example, or intercourse, or what we consider the more overt sexual ways of connecting, but that's another, we go into that too. And we have to broaden the definition of what is sex. It's very limited.
When you're working with people who identify as heterosexual, absolutely.
Yes,
When I
easy to get caught in that trap.
I worked at Good Vibrations many years ago, and it really helped me see how many men live in this very narrow little box of, like, what is okay to want.
Oh,
And then
right, right, right.
when like, there were a lot of men who came in with a tremendous amount of shame around wanting to put things in their butts, right?
Yes, yes,
Especially when they were in straight relationships.
right.
And, just as an example. But so when you're or heterosexual couples who only know about PIV, penis and
Right.
vagina, and where, like, even foreplay, expanding foreplay is a radical act, right?
Yeah,
And so it's like, oh, actually taking the time to arouse and it could be that
yeah.
it's energetic, or it could just be that somebody needs a little more time being touched in other places besides
True. Yeah, I
directly on
mean,
their clitoris.
we never yeah, that's true. And as, the female body, the way we're wired, we have the same amount of erectile tissue as a man. It's just spread over a larger area, and it usually needs a little more time before it's gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, like, I'm
Mm,
ready for physical contact and physical penetration." But we also discount the fact that orgasm and sex can happen with no touch happening at all. I mean, I've had some of the craziest orgasms with my partner not even touching me, just from
yes.
breath and eye contact, like, the energetic like, hot, like, what? Like, so I don't even need the physical. I love that part too, but wow, there's just so much more out there available to us, and I think that can come down some of the sacred sexuality talk too that you mentioned you wanted to go into.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's
That's a perfect segue because it's an area that I'm particularly interested in,
yeah,
and I would love to hear about, for you, moving from a place of being in a relationship where you identified as having low desire, and then moving to the
yeah.
trajectory of moving through and discovering sacred sexuality. And if you could also define for the listeners who may not know what that is, what it is, and then also your personal experience of moving into it, how you discovered it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think to start, I always, when I was sort of shut down in my marriage and not wanting sex like at all, it was like low desire, was like no desire, more or less.
Mm.
Every 6 months maybe I'd, get the urge.
Mm.
But always knowing, always feeling I know something more is possible here. That was really what was happening for me. And I there's something more that I wanted. I just didn't know how to I didn't know how to get it. I didn't know how to create it. I didn't know the pathway there. I had this inkling of it, this feeling in me, and I had heard about, "Oh, wow, it'd be so cool to have, like, a full body orgasm," or,
Mhm.
but I just had no idea how to get there and was really stuck. And my awakening happened when I left the marriage and eventually underwent the study of my own sexuality after another, like, very short relationship a couple years after the marriage ended that sort of left me in the same place that I felt like I was in my marriage, just sort of feeling like, well, totally unfulfilled and knowing more was possible, but realizing I'd always made my partner responsible for my pleasure. That was really what came out of that. And that was the defining moment where I just said, I just want something different so bad. Like, how do I learn this? And I made a declaration to undergo the study of my own sexuality. And like within a week, I was up at the yoga studio and this book jumped off the shelf at me, Tantric Orgasm for Women by Diana Richardson. I read it cover to cover probably within a couple of days. And I started to apply the approach to sex that she was speaking about in that book in my own time with my own body. So I was
Mm,
not in a relationship. I'm like, which was actually really nice. It just
yeah.
gave me time to dive deep into myself. But a lot of what it is really, what is sacred sexuality? I'll give you my definition of that in a minute. But really, it's more than anything about getting present. It's about slowing down and getting rid of this goal and getting out of the mind. And so, one of the things I had discovered about myself as I embarked on this journey and started to slow down, get really present, and get rid of the goal. No more goal. When I would touch myself, it was no longer about trying to just get it off and get to the orgasm. It was like, "Okay, let me just slow down and notice what am I feeling in my," and this was before I had all the, what I do with the pleasure keys now. I hadn't found Betty Martin's work with Wheel of Consent, so I didn't really know what I was actually doing, and I can talk about that in a minute. But slowing down, noticing sensations in my body, getting really, really present, and from that place of deep presence of actually not being in my head anymore. I also got rid of using I would always use fantasy to, like, get off, to get to orgasm, and I was like, "Okay, I really wanna learn how to be in my body. I wanna have this, a different experience." So I just set fantasy aside completely, and I started to get present in the body. I started to notice what's happening in my genitals when I would touch myself, and I actually had a lot of lack of sensation down there.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't feel a whole lot. It was shocking. I was like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" But I slowed down. I breathed. I said yes to the feeling of numbness, and an amazing thing happened and very quickly. I had all kinds of emotional releases that
Mm.
started to happen. All this old grief and sadness and anger, frustration that was all being held on, I just poured out of my heart. And after I had these big emotional releases, I suddenly started to feel more. And I had a self-pleasure session a few weeks later. This was not long into my, "I'm gonna figure this out" declaration, really just a few weeks. I had an experience where I was self-pleasuring, touching, and just, being fully present, not trying to get anywhere, not trying to create any kind of a feeling, having way more sensation in my body. I suddenly had this experience of this wave of pleasure roll up through the bottoms of my feet. My hands were vibrating, my face was, like, numb and, like, tingling, and this wave of just pleasure and sensation rolled up through my whole body, shot out of my heart. All this love started pouring through me, tears started running down I was, like, in this state of ecstasy, and I have this realization, like, "Oh my god, I'm having a full body orgasmic experience." And, oh my god, pleasure lives in my body? This is in me? Love is in me? Orgasm is in me? You mean that guy that promised he was gonna give this to me it's not in his hands, it's in mine, it's in my body? So it was this moment of deep empowerment of realizing that if I could find this pathway within myself, I could help other women find it.
Mhm.
And that I was no longer dependent on, like, grabbing onto a relationship for love or expecting a man to come in and give me these crazy, wonderful, blissful sexual experiences. I knew the pathway within my body, and I knew I could show really any future lover how
Yeah.
to access that. I mean, that's what happened about 6 months later. So I did attract a lovely man into my life who was really open to learning and growing, and, we had a lovely time together just, like, implementing in the relational space, like, a lot of the stuff I had just figured out on my own. Let me pause, and I wanna go to the definition
Yeah.
of sacred sexuality, but I'll pause there for a minute and let you
Yeah.
vent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, actually, just moving forward, it would be great if we go a little slower so that we could, because there's
Yeah,
so much that you're saying that I would love to even pull out apart even more.
sure.
Because there are a couple things. One thing that's feels really important to note in that story is how relaxation is also about being with the moments of tension
Yeah.
and the pain, and what you were willing to do is to go into the center of the pain or the emotion, which helped you then like tension, if we're trying to avoid something, it's like
Yeah.
we can't, quote, unquote, "relax." Like, if you're in a
Right.
massage and someone's rubbing you and it doesn't feel good and you're like, "Just it's okay, it's okay." You just get tighter and tighter. So, being entering into the thing that you might wanna avoid actually allowed your system to release, and
Yes.
then days later, it allowed you to have a full body orgasm because whatever
Right.
perhaps emotional blockages were then you were able to
Yeah.
move through them, and that's just so beautiful.
Yeah, and it's such a good point that you make, and so we can use the bodywork analogy here, okay?
Yeah.
Because I know you'll
Yeah.
get this. There is a form of tension release in the muscles, like, I'm not sure if it's trigger point therapy, or but it's where you actually on a very tight muscle, you actually apply pressure and contract it more. So if your shoulder's real all the way up to your tight, massage therapist might say, "I want you to lift your shoulder to your ear," as he or she's
Mhm.
applying some pressure on one of these muscles here. And what that actually does is then the muscle suddenly it lets go. So I call the concept that I call this in my work is called the concept of embrace
Yeah.
or the principle of embrace, which is really truly a practice. This is also, by the way, a sacred a sexuality practice. We could talk more about that and what that is. But the practice of embrace is about saying yes to exactly what's there as it is, the way that it is. And we tend to think, I have to relax. So immediately I'm trying to do something. If you're trying to do something, now you're automatically creating more tension in the body. And tension is the biggest obstacle to pleasure, by the way,
Exactly.
right? Whether it's mental tension, emotional tension, physical tension, it's all a manifestation of many things, but it's an obstacle to our ability to experience pleasure, orgasmic bliss, desire. It gets in the way of everything. But if we're trying to get rid of it, now we're creating more tension. So, what we want to do is say yes to the tension and turn the volume up on it.
Yeah.
So in my self-exploration, one of the things that happened, this is a good example of this. I encountered, well, first there was sort of numbness, like I didn't feel a lot in my
Mhm.
genitals. And I thought I got really upset and like I should be feeling more. And the tendency was to resort to fantasy. Let me do that because I know how to do that. Or to like apply more pressure, more sensation.
Mm.
But because I was trying something new, I was like, wait a minute, I don't know. I want a new experience here. I'm not going to use fantasy. I'm not gonna try to make something happen by, like, more sensation, right? That's a lot of times what we do. I'm trying to
Mhm.
cultivate more
Mhm.
sensitivity. So what I did was I just slowed down and I just said, "What if I just say yes to the numbness?" And I just relax and I drop towards that. And this is a question I'll use a lot. I do this with my clients, but I did this with myself back then. What else do I feel when I'm numb? What else is
Mhm.
there? And
Mhm.
next thing you knew, there was all this sadness of just not being, like this grief, this sorrow. So immediately I'm not numb anymore, right? I'm feeling no. So that state can shift very, very quickly when
Mhm.
we don't make it wrong. And that's really what relaxation is. It's saying yes to the thing, and it's also meeting it through physical sensation. Like, that's what I think people like, "Try to relax." Well, the best way to relax is just to notice physical sensation,
Mhm.
actually. Like, it's literally that simple. You do that for long enough, keep bringing your mind back as your mind wanders somewhere else and come back physical. You'll probably take yourself into a sleep state, actually.
Mhm.
Right, until you get practice at staying conscious while in a deep alpha or theta state of relaxation.
Yeah.
So, physical sensation is really the gateway in, that's why that key of noticing is so important as well, by the way.
Mhm. No, absolutely. So beautiful. That numbness piece, it's really fascinating. Even, the other day, it's like seeing I use martial arts-based practices with clients and
Oh,
then
cool.
also do body work, and so this piece of, even supporting like you were describing, a shoulder that's tight, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, "Oh, let me be, as the practitioner, let me be that scared part of you or that, shocked part of you or the part, like I'll hold that tension so that the rest of them can relax, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so it's getting to explore that. And sometimes, the practitioner can amplify it and support it so that the rest of you gets to go like, oh, what a relief. I don't
Yeah,
have to hold that all by myself.
exactly. Yeah.
And then that going into whether it's emotional or physical pain, so essential because as you illustrated with that as well, that the numbness can shift
Mhm.
so quickly if we
Yeah.
actually like it could be like, I'm afraid, wait, now I'm numb. Or and then I'm suddenly sad. It's like how
Mhm.
layered they are versus just being like, I'm blank. And it's like, well, what's the quality to the blankness?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, because if you think about numbness as it's a survival response, it's a
Mhm.
dissociative response oftentimes. It's a
Yeah.
way we avoid feeling something we don't
Mhm.
wanna feel or doesn't feel safe to feel or they're scared to feel.
Yeah.
It's really a protective mechanism, which is great that we have that. The problem is when it gets frozen in our nervous system and then in our bodies to the extent that, let's say, we are totally not interested in sex. We lose our desire for intimacy or sex, which is a byproduct of that sort of shutdown, which a lot of that can come from just relational and contextual things that are
Mhm.
going on. If
Mhm.
you're with someone who's abusive, like that's not going to be a safe place to
Yeah.
open sexually or to just
Mhm.
have sexual desire because you are in the wrong part of the brain, usually, right? If you're in that prefrontal cortex, your amygdala is activated, it's looking for threats all the time. We have to be in that parasympathetic where the amygdala is quieted down. We're in our hindbrain. We're in a state where like sex and digestion and hunger, all those things live in the parasympathetic when that active part of the brain is quieted down, when there's a sense of felt safety in the body and also in the relational space if we're with another human.
Yeah. And so, for one person, that numbness can come from like being shamed in your relationship from somebody else. It's
Yeah.
childhood sexual abuse. So there's like a real range of experiences that create numbness
Yes.
internally, right? Like in the cervix or in the clitoris or it just even in the heart.
Absolutely.
All these
Whole
parts.
body. Yeah.
And for you, the process of unnumbing, right?
Mhm.
Like denumbing, was was it that one experience? I mean, it's like all these pieces over time
Yeah.
contributed to removing and working with layers of numbness, or what was your experience?
Well, I mean, my experience was how I look at this work.
Mhm.
It's really just a pathway. And so I think as women, if you've given birth to children, I have two kids. I don't know if you do or not, Tarna. But it doesn't matter. It's okay. You
Yeah.
can find the pathway regardless. And even
Yeah.
men who don't, give birth can find this pathway as well. It really is the birth process, which is it's a path of surrender. And so I think I like to look at it this way rather than like a thing that I did to like get rid of the numbness. It's really was a pathway that I found by slowing down, relaxing, and just learning how to say yes. Let me feel more, being willing to feel the pain. In my case, it was mostly emotional pain. Saying yes, give me more, let me feel more, take me deeper into this. I say yes, and leaning towards that discomfort. And that was the place where the gates opened. And from that, there was a different perspective and there was more sensation in my body because I was no longer avoiding feeling, there was a lot of grief in my case. I was no longer avoiding the grief. I went all the way in. I asked for more. I turned the volume. I mean, no, it sounds
Yeah.
sadistic. Give me more. Let me feel more. Take me all the way. I just, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. And that's the birth process as well. When we give
Mhm.
birth, it's about surrender and saying yes and sinking towards. If a woman's in birth and labor and she's backing away from the pain. She's holding her breath. She's resisting that process. It's going to be much more painful. It's going to take
Mhm.
longer, be much more unpleasant. And it can, it still might hurt, but it can be over much more quickly if we're able to relax. And so it's really a pathway. And that was really what I had discovered
Mhm.
was that pathway. And I was no longer afraid to let myself feel deeply and to have whatever emotion was there, whatever sensation, I was just learned to say yes to it. And so that, became a process. And I would say it's an ongoing journey, though there's not nearly the amount of debris there as I really deepened in that work. It's really a feminine spiritual path of sacred sexuality where we're using our sexual energy, but also our physical sexual anatomy and learning how to breathe into that and take consciousness into that
Mm.
because we hold wounds from lifetimes, collective trauma, our personal trauma is held in the circuitry of our body. And so that work, the sacred feminine work, I have a teacher I studied with on that.
Mhm.
It really moves the needle when we just are able to learn that quality of embrace and breath and softening and just saying yes. And then the gates open and things look different. And literally, like, that's pleasure and life force and orgasm live there, right under with the anger and the fear and the frustration. That's part of it. So we
Mhm.
can just say yes to that. The bliss is also like enmeshed with that. They're not actually separate. It's a
Exactly.
gateway into orgasm. Like anger is actually can be a gateway into orgasm. I've had that experience as
And
well, just in a healing session.
and grief, right? It's like as big as your container is for grief, it's that big for pleasure and joy and
Cry your way into
yeah.
orgasm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Or
Mhm. Well, but also it takes a certain amount. I mean, I imagine you've seen this as well, especially if you're working primarily with women. My male clients will do their masturbation homework. Women so rarely do. Over like
yeah,
23
I
years of
know.
of working with women, yeah, or working with people around this, women, I can count on my hand the number of
Yeah.
women who will do that homework, and so the courage that it took for you to move towards it is
Yeah.
exceptional, right?
Yeah.
Where you were like, "Okay, I'm willing." I feel like my female clients have a lot more willingness to feel their grief, even go into their anger,
Mhm.
but pleasure is a really tricky one. It's
Yeah.
loaded, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah.
In a male body, obviously the genital anatomy is hanging outside the body. I mean, they're touching that in the womb, like it's normalized that little boys are gonna touch themselves. Whereas for girls, our stuff's internal. And there's a lot more shame around it as well. Like we're given messages. Even the word the pudendal nerve, which innervates part of our genitals, means shameful. Like that's literally the translation of that word. And it's right. So it's
Yeah.
like just built in that yeah, and I think we've all had experiences I did as a kid being shamed for exploring my body sexually and told don't touch that. So for women, it is it's important to do that, but you're right. I think I've had that as well. And yet that was the place that moved the needle for me the most was making that time to actually touch myself genitally, sexually.
Mhm.
That was
Mhm.
the place that really dialed it in for me. So I think it's unfortunate that so many women are reluctant or resistant to spending that time with themselves and moving through the very thing that's probably in the way of whatever reason they're coming to you for.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Well,
shame. Or the fear of being selfish. If I feel too much pleasure or it's dirty to feel pleasure or whatever the thing
yeah.
is that's there, I guess, that's the thing to work on.
All of that, right? And it can be so complex because there can even be orgasm as a child when you're being abused, and so it gets so complicated and pleasure all these things kind of get, like, merged together, melted together, and how do you, like,
Yeah.
peel them apart and start to go like, "Oh,
Right.
there can be, excitement and anxiety can be separated. Pleasure and shame can be separated." Back to sacred sexuality.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to step onto that path and explore having a more spiritual relationship to their
Mhm.
sexuality instead of having it be so transactional, what are some of the components?
It's really not as sexy, I think, as people want it to be. When you hear the word sacred sexual, it sounds so mystical, and it can be. It certainly can be, but it's not usually the place that we start. It's very mundane. Where do we begin? We start with the body. We start with noticing. We start with feeling. We start with relaxing. We start with saying yes to the thing that's there. We can say yes to, I notice that I'm wanting to get somewhere right now. I'm noticing I want this moment to be more than what it is. I'm noticing I want Susan's answer to that question to be more exotic. But that is the paradox.
Mhm,
That really truly is the paradox, and that in a sense is what makes it sacred because
mhm,
it's not so simple, right? The mystery is revealed in understanding that the duality there is really no duality, yet we learn through duality. We
mhm.
acknowledge the duality, but it's all one thing. So I was talking a minute ago about anger could be as we feel, and say yes, 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 all the way through. It can turn into pleasure,
Mhm,
can turn
mhm,
into like literally cause full body orgasmic experiences. So how does that happen if anger is this thing I'm trying to not feel? And so largely the sacred sexuality path, how I see it, is a path of union. It's a path of non-duality, of non-dual, like learning to understand all sensations that arise. They're neither good nor bad.
mhm,
Now, I can say one feels more pleasurable than other, and we develop preferences for things as our human condition. We prefer things. But sometimes that can be limiting as well.
mm,
It can keep us in this idea of separateness. And when anytime we're doing that, we're cutting ourselves off from an aspect of the divine, an aspect of God. which is available to us through our sexual energy, is the life force energy. It literally is the thing that creates life, physical life. New humans come from sexual engagement physically, but also the energetic piece. How does that whole human grow in there? Isn't that just such a mystery?
Exactly.
Where is that even coming from? I mean, if you really like trip out on that for now, it's like, whoa. So if you look
Mhm.
at the sexual energy, it's truly the most powerful force in the universe, and all of life is sexual. I mean, I can't even look out the window and not see sex everywhere.
Mhm.
It's everywhere. And it's how we got here. And so how could that not be somehow holy or sacred? It's not separate. And where we go wrong is we separate it. We say, the religious programming that we have that sex is sinful or dirty, masturbation is wrong, or it's somehow not part of God that's the biggest sin of all. That's the biggest lie of all in the religious brainwashing. It's the
Mhm.
biggest misunderstanding is that our sexuality is somehow separate or dirty or shameful. And that's just been the programming that's been put through the collective consciousness of our modern day culture through the distortion of the truth.
Right. Well, and this piece that's so important, the dependence on keeping things as dual. Right?
Mhm.
It's because in the reality, if there's full self-acceptance, which is like having a non-dual relationship with yourself, right? It's like, "Oh, I'm gonna accept this angry part of me and this joyful part of me, and, like, all aspects of
Yeah.
myself." If I embrace that, then there aren't these contractions that are stopping pleasure or just
Right.
energy to flow through my system, which then, if I come together with another body
Yeah.
allows it to flow through both of us, which is a really profound experience, but I think
Yeah.
it's so important to be like, this is also it can be a solo path. It can be a solo
Yeah.
practice that you then ignite with another person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's right. And it's really about our relationship to things.
Yeah.
So, what you're speaking to in a solo practice, it's our relationship. For example, one aspect of the solo practice is what is my relationship to my emotions?
Mm,
Am I contracting around them, crystallizing around them, not wanting to feel them? Am I out of control with them and just totally unconscious around them and vomiting my emotions all over everybody? Or am I in a place of surrender and awareness and presence?
mhm.
Relaxation, presence, and awareness. That's the first triad, by the way, of the pleasure keys. In right relationship so that I can begin to cultivate relationship. Non-dual, we learn non-duality through duality. I mean, that again is the
Yeah.
paradox. And one of the ways in sacred sexuality and sacred relationship that we create that sexual charge and erotic energy, that desire to come into sexual union is through duality, through like consciously creating difference. That's the thing
Mhm,
literally that causes combustion to happen, right? We have to have spaciousness.
mhm.
We also have to have different, like the polarity of the energies is what literally creates that magnetism. And it's so fun.
What's so interesting, right, is would love to just have a conversation about paradox. Like, I could talk for
Okay.
an hour about paradox. Right? But it is because there is this piece, it's like, okay, so polarity creates this attraction and this turn on, and yet what we're also looking at is union. And we're looking at one person as a mirror of the other, and our system is actually not separate. And so I
Right.
it's just such a yeah, paradoxes are endlessly interesting to me.
Yeah, me too. And it's the nature of the universe. It's the nature of the divine is paradox.
Mhm.
I mean, we could go on and on about this, but exactly, there's different paths in the spiritual tradition. We can look at the path of transcending all that is, right? Transcendence. But there's also the path of embrace, which is saying yes to that I am the all that is. I am everything. Like consciousness is all. There's no separation. It's all God
Mm,
or none of it's God. And I have to transcend. And both are right. Both are pathways into wholeness and union
yeah.
and oneness, right? One is through transcending, the other one is through moving through and embrace, which is just a slightly different pathway.
Mhm, mhm. The thing that's I've been thinking about lately and interested in is the complexity of when you have so I wrote an article about one taste
Oh,
recently,
yeah.
and when you have a community or a path that's about spirituality, but also sexuality, and there's how psychology holds ego and then how the spiritual world holds ego,
Yeah.
right? And so the spiritual world holds ego as something to dissolve, while
Mm,
healthy, I don't like the word healthy, but in the psychological realm, you need a strong enough ego. You need to have a strong sense of ego. If it's fragmented from trauma, usually,
Yeah.
but to have the ability to know what feels good to you and to
mm,
take a stand and give consent, you need to be embodied and have good ego strength,
yeah.
right?
Mm.
So, what is sexual freedom to you? How would you define
Well,
that?
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what it's not for me. It's not you don't have to like take your shirt off and run around the lake and, you know, have an open relationship. Like, all those things are fine. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we have this idea that I'm not sexually liberated unless suddenly I'm in a polyamorous relationship and I'm going to sex parties and I'm really flamboyant with my sexuality, really free with my sexuality externally to the world, because I'm not like that. I'm a little more reserved, but I feel pretty liberated and pretty confident in my sexuality, but I don't have a need to like have to, and that's fine. If that's what you want to do, go for it. That's awesome. So I think it's really about finding what it is for you. How do you wear your sexuality in a way that's authentic and unique for you? And how well do you know yourself? Right? How well are you in touch with what your needs and wants and desires are? Are you able to both give and receive fully and unconditionally? And I don't just mean necessarily in a sexual way, though, yes, that's certainly part of it. But are you able to open yourself to deep receiving from life? I mean, that is sex. Sex to me is just about connection and the cycle of giving and receiving, which are one thing. They appear to be opposite, but they're equal and yet opposite. And it completes the cycle. So, how good am I at discerning that? Am I able to, what's my capacity for receiving? Can I expand that capacity? Can I also expand my capacity to give willingly, not out of obligation? Right? That's conditional giving,
Mhm.
but really unconditional. So sexual freedom is knowing oneself
Yeah.
and finding that pathway within your own self. And I think in order to do that, back to the ego conversation, we have to know ourselves. We have to have a sense of self in order to transcend the self, to dissolve the self. It's going to usually work out a lot better for most of us and be far less traumatic, because it's a pretty intense moment going through an experience of sort of when that part kind of dies. That can be kind of a scare, mostly terrifying momentarily.
Mhm.
But so right? So to have that groundedness in that, to be able to move beyond it and into a different experience, to dissolve, we need both. We have to be able to hold ourselves in that, but also be able to move beyond it. In order to do that, we have to have some kind of container to hold ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's just, what am I surrendering into? It can be very much scarier, really.
Absolutely. Right.
So there's two. It's like the
Mhm.
duality, right?
Mhm.
There's the witness, and the creator and the creation are one thing.
Mhm.
It's just about the relationship between the two. The one who's witnessing and the one who's experiencing.
Yeah, beautiful. And is there a particular practice that you have been in that helped you learn how to, on a somatic level, on an emotional level, surrender and keep surrendering?
I mean, again, it's not sexy. This is
Yeah.
not like some crazy mystical, no, but it literally is the simplest thing. Is, yeah, it was just learning how to actually feel, learning how to hold my awareness in my body on sensations first, first physical sensations, from their emotions, from their energy.
Mhm.
And from energy, whoa, now there's like this other world opening through energy. I mean, there's a whole realm there, universes that are not accessible otherwise. So, starting with the most obvious, which is the physical sensation, just learning how to be present in my body. And yeah, there's different practices for how to do that. One that really helped me, and this is easy because your listeners can look it up. There's a yogic practice called Yoga Nidra, ancient yogic practice. One of my absolute favorite things that has a lot of the elements of what we've been speaking to around relaxation, presence, awareness, noticing. Literally, it's a practice of noticing and as physical sensation and working with duality. And it's what's so great about it is you just lay there on the floor in a really nice, comfortable, you could put in a whole bunch of blankets and pillows down, make a little nest, and you're just kind of being guided through it. You're listening, guide, or you can guide yourself. I find it helpful to have an audio to guide. But that practice helped me a lot, as well as before I found Yoga Nidra, even just the self pleasure practice. But some people need a little more
Yeah.
structure, right? And so I was just flying blind. I'm like, but I was able to hold myself in it and keep myself. But if you need more, Yoga Nidra is wonderful. I also have if your listeners would like, and I can give it to you for the show notes, I have a guided meditation called the sensual awareness practice, which is maybe like a 15-minute practice that incorporates the same principles as yoga nidra. I can give you the link for that for your
Mhm.
listeners.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it is very simple. The solutions often are very, very simple. And the reason they're hard to do is because largely we get lazy or we're expecting something much more glamorous than that, right? And that's the ego, right?
Yeah.
So if you can let that part go and show up fully for the thing and just trust the process, trust your body, and get curious. See what happens. Find out for yourself. Like, just do an experiment on yourself. That's the best way and gateway in. Just start to experiment and start to notice what's available right now in this moment. And the more you're able to notice, get more refined in that, the more things start to open up, the more you start to notice, and the more you'll find that pathway in to the sacred through the physical.
Beautiful. Thank you. And how else can the listeners find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is pathwaytopleasure.com. That's where all my stuff lives. And then I also do have an ebook called The Pleasure Keys, which talks about the first triad. If your listeners would like to get a copy of that, it's at pleasurekeys.com. And that walks you through those first three triads. And there's some practical stuff in there as well that's useful for if someone wants to kind of learn, like, how do you take these first steps. That ebook is really lovely for that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again,
Thank you.
if you've learned ways of being from your family of origin that don't serve you, the reality is that you've been practicing unconscious behaviors for decades, and you have to engage in new practices in order to unlearn them and do something different. Studies show that it takes 30 to 60 days to create a new habit. So, really, nobody can create this change besides you. You're the one who needs to make that choice. Unless you engage in new practices under stress, you will default to what you know best and what you've practiced up until now. You can't think your way out of this. For over 35 years, I've been training and investing my time and energy into to increase my own self-awareness and my own capacity to do things differently than how I learned to do them. I have found that there are very key practices that help people, myself included, transform. You may notice that I include practices at the end of each of my podcast episodes. I've created a course based on what I see as these key principles, and it's filled with a month's worth of daily practices. And you'll receive these videos along with exercises you can do on your own in order to transform your habits. For more information about my course, Pathways to Peace, Mindful Practices for Transformative and Vibrant Living, you can go to charnacassell.com. Once again, thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed that episode, please like, rate, and review and share it with your friends. If you'd like to stay connected, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at LaidOPEN Podcast. That's LaidOpenPodcast. And you can find out more about my work at passionatelife.org, or you can join my newsletter and read my blog and take a course with me or buy my workbook at charnacassell.com. We all have different capacities, but I believe in our capacity to grow and change together. Until next time.